got one that can see.
Your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah. You gotta work, never tell.
Tonight, for the first time, Prince Andrew speaks out.
I don't know why I've collected that title, because I never have really partied, and I've never really felt the need to go and party.
Am I right in thinking you threw a birthday party for Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, at Sandringham?
No, it was a shooting weekend.
A shooting weekend?
Just a straightforward shooting weekend.
Why? Why were you staying with a convicted sex offender?
Right, because this was serious, and I felt that doing it over the telephone was the chicken's way of doing it. I had to go and see him and talk to him. Oh, in 2010, that certainly wasn't a party to celebrate his release in December, because it was a small dinner party. There were only 8 or 10 of us, I think, at the dinner.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay, and I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable.
Okay. And your strengths?
But that definitely wasn't you getting a foot massage from a Russian girl in Jeffrey Epstein's house.
No.
No thanks. I don't want to be part of your sex festival.
It might seem a funny way to break off a friendship, a 4-day house party of sorts with a dinner. It's an odd way to break up a friendship.
It's a difficult way of putting it. That's a very stark way of putting it. Yes, you're absolutely right.
She says she met you in 2001. She dined with you. She danced with you. You bought her drinks. You were in Tramp nightclub in London. And she went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Didn't happen. There are a number of things that are wrong with that story. One of which is that I don't know where the bar is in Tramps. I don't drink. I don't think I've ever bought a drink in Tramps whenever I was there.
You know that you were at home with the children. Was it a memorable night?
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do. A very unusual thing for me to do. I've only been through Woking a couple of times, And I remember it weirdly distinctly. As soon as somebody reminded me of it, I went, oh yes, I remember that. I went, oh yes, I remember that.
She was very specific about that night. She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat.
That's bollocks. No, go on.
Or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, oh actually, yes. I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply it was almost impossible for me to sweat.
She provided a photo of the
Yes.
two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
You've seen the photo.
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
I can't.
You think it is you next to her in the photo?
Oh, it's definitely me. I mean, that's a picture of me. It's not a picture of. I don't believe it's a picture of me in London, because when I go out in London, I wear a suit and a tie. That's what I would describe as those are my travelling clothes if I'm going overseas. So I've got plenty of photographs of me dressed in those sorts of sort of kit, but not there.
There was a witness there, Johanna Stolberg, who says that you did visit the house in that month.
I probably did. I don't think on one of the weird things, I was staying with the because of what I was doing. I was staying with the Consul General, which is further down the street on Fifth. So I wasn't staying there. I may have visited, but no, definitely no activity.
She said she had sex with you 3 times. Once in a London house when she was trafficked to you in Maxwell's house.
Yes.
Once in New York a month or so later at Epstein's mansion, and once on his private island in a group of 7 or 8 other girls.
No.
For the record, is there any way you could have had sex with that young woman or any young woman trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein in any of his residences?
No. And without putting too fine a point on it, if you're a man, it is a positive act to have sex with somebody. You have to take some sort of positive action. And so therefore, if you try to forget, it's very difficult to try and forget positive action.
Epstein's housekeeper, also in a Florida court legal deposition, said that you visited the Palm Beach residence around 4 times a year. You got a daily massage.
4 times a year?
That was what he said in a Florida court legal deposition.
No.
I'm just wondering, when you look back now, is there a chance that those massages might have been the services of someone who was being sexually exploited or trafficked by Epstein? From the palace.
Yep.
At no time did I see, witness or suspect any suspicious behaviour.
Yep.
Virginia Roberts' legal team says you could not spend time around Epstein and not know what was going on.
If you are somebody like me, then people behave in a subtly different way.
You could not spend time around him and not know. But you'd notice if there were hundreds of underage girls in Buckingham Palace,
God.
wouldn't you?
But you would notice if there were hundreds of underage girls in Jeffrey's house. Wasn't there.
You seem utterly convinced you're telling the truth. Would you be willing to testify or give a statement under oath if you were asked?
Well, I'm like everybody else, and I would have to take all the legal advice that there was before I was to do that sort of thing. But if push came to shove and the legal the legal advice was to do so, then I would be duty-bound to do so.
Because you've said there are many unanswered questions,
Yep.
everyone affected wants closure. You would help to provide that closure.
I think there's just as much closure for me as there is for everybody else. In the same way that I have questions to answer in the sense of what was I doing? What was I doing?
When was your last contact with her?
It was earlier this year, funny enough, in the summer, in the summer.
About what?
She was here doing some rally.
So even though he had by then been arrested and was facing charges of sex trafficking?
No. This was early spring, I think. It was long, because when was he arrested?
July.
No, it was before July.
And that was the last time?
Yeah. Because
Did you discuss Epstein at all then?
No, not actually. Funnily enough, no, not at all. There wasn't anything to discuss about him because he wasn't in the news. It wasn't. It was just we'd moved on.
How do you move on from this?
Well, it's an interesting way of putting it. I'm carrying on with what I do. I have a number of things that I have been doing since 2011. We've got 500,000, or just over 500,000 young people who are using the service, and I'm trying to think what else we've got, but it's well.
Strings to Brent's bow, a philanthropist.
I know we have to bring this to a close because we're running out of time. You've talked about a thick skin. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you have any sense now of guilt, regret or shame about any of your behaviour and your friendship with Epstein.
Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes.
Unbecoming? He was a sex offender.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being polite, in the sense that he was a sex offender. He was a sex offender.
Is there anything you feel has been left unsaid that you would like to say now?
No, I don't think so.
Your Royal Highness, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Prince Andrew agreeing to settle a sexual abuse lawsuit brought by Virginia Giuffre.
Prince Andrew is said to be planning a surprise return to public life.
The Duke of York has settled the sex assault case.
Queen Elizabeth's younger son, Prince Andrew, is settling a sexual assault lawsuit.
Settled, but perhaps far from done. On both sides of the Atlantic, the Duke of York's settlement with Virginia Giuffre dominating the headlines. And on both sides of this damaging and very public case, questions still to be answered. The settlement came just 6 months after Virginia Giuffre filed her suit against the Duke, claiming he had sexually abused her when she was a child and a victim of trafficking by his friend, the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. There was no admission of wrongdoing in yesterday's settlement, but acknowledgement that she had been a victim of abuse. From the outset, Miss Giuffre said this is what she wanted.
He knows exactly what he's done, and I hope he comes clean about it.
So is this settlement vindication enough for her and the other women she said she fought for? Sarah Ransom says she was repeatedly raped by Epstein on his private island. Bob Lewis is her lawyer.
She feels vindicated, further validates her own claims that she was sex trafficked by Epstein and Maxwell.
But of course, this is a settlement without any admission of wrongdoing. So can it truly be a vindication?
I do understand survivors are not happy about, but in this world, typically we don't get 100% of what we want. No, I'll take 80%. He says now that he essentially believes Miss Giuffre and the other victims, which for years he was saying they were all making it up. So it goes a long ways to validating their claims, and I think in that sense it is a victory. This could give encouragement to those who may have not yet spoken out, and in that sense may move us along to finding out who else was involved in the sex trafficking operation.
But for Prince Andrew now, there will be no public hearing. The statement yesterday suggesting his focus was rehabilitating a reputation which has seen him isolated from the royal family and stripped of all his military titles. In their place, he will seek a new role, to fight against the evils of sex trafficking and for its victims.
Having a senior royal campaign for your cause would be regarded by most charities as priceless. But it's not clear how much victims of sexual abuse and trafficking value the notion the Duke of York will now fight for them. For years, he even denied knowing the woman he's now settled with, and right up until the end allowed his legal team to rubbish her case and question her credibility in the most personal of ways.
As recently as October, the legal team submitted documents to the court accusing Miss Giuffre of pursuing a baseless lawsuit, simply looking for another payday. They even referenced tabloid articles calling her not a sex slave, but a money-hungry sex kitten.
One of the many extraordinary things about that statement yesterday is this idea that Prince Andrew is now looking to fight for the victims of sex trafficking, for victims of abuse. How do you think that will go down with those victims?
There was an enormous level of arrogance in that statement. What exactly does Prince Andrew have to offer? Prince Andrew leaned on every single one of the worst myths and stereotypes that victims of sexual violence face about whether, their honour, what their previous sexual behaviours. They made out like she was in it just for a payday. Victims who I work with would not welcome Prince Andrew sitting down and expecting them to help his pathway to redemption.
The Duke of York may yet need some charity himself. It is not yet clear exactly how much he has agreed to pay Miss Giuffre, nor crucially, where that money will come from.
Well, joining me now is Labour Shadow Culture Minister Rachel Maskell, whose constituency is York Central and who's called for the Duke of York to give up the title. Good evening. How sure are you that your constituents agree with you? Have you been inundated with messages?
I have, but also our local paper took a poll, and from that poll, 88% of people living in York said that they want this disassociation. Clearly, York is a global city, and carrying the title of a duke is an ambassador role where you take our name across the globe. And of course, what we want to ensure is the real values. We are England's only human rights city, which is there to support women, believe women in what they say. And of course, what we have seen over months and months is a woman being undermined. And that is so typical of what we see across society at this time. So this is really important. If Andrew has heard and heeded, he could take the first act of listening to what people in my city are saying, and many of them survivors of sexual violence.
I mean, he's admitted nothing, he's been convicted of nothing, but what you're saying is it the change in position from attacking Ms. Giuffre before to what it says in the statement, which is sort of clearing her of anything?
Well, statements and even issuing compensation is one thing, but it will not mean a thing if there is not action which follows up. And of course, at this time, I would say the action that's needed is real reflection. And one of the things that people in my city are asking for is to reflect on the title he carries, carrying the name of our city. And as a result of people saying they no longer want that association with him, the first step he could take is to voluntarily relinquish that title.
Right, but the questions over the monarchy now are getting much bigger, aren't they, with the announcements of this investigation by police into the Prince's charitable foundation over cash for honours allegations. I mean, what does that mean for the whole question of the monarchy now?
And there certainly were questions as well about the appointment of the charity commissioner, who on their appointment panel had people from the Prince's organisations. So we have to look at the whole system. But when it comes to the monarchy, again, I think there needs to be a real reflection. We must remember that this is a Jubilee year where we are honouring somebody who has loyally served our country, but we're not seeing that same representation in the next generation. And I think there are serious questions that now must be asked.
I mean, we've been asking serious questions about what would happen if the Prime Minister was questioned by police under caution. It is conceivable, we don't know where this investigation is going to lead, it's conceivable that Prince Charles could also be questioned by police, either as a witness or under caution. If that were to happen, do you think it is possible for Prince Charles to become King Charles?
Well, what we are seeing is men of power and privilege being able to use that position in order to protect themselves, whereas we're not seeing the same justice for other people, and that has got to stop. The Prime Minister clearly has got to be honest about what has happened, and that is what everybody is asking for. And he himself, another example, is somebody that denied there was a happening, denied there were parties, and
but
then
let's keep it on the royal family. I mean, the question is, do you think it's possible, because the Queen, after all, has addressed the question of what will happen after her reign is over by talking about her wish for Queen Camilla. I mean, do you think this could open up a wider debate about the future status of the monarchy?
Well, I think it absolutely does. And that's why we have got to look at the situation of power and privilege in our society and the role that it can play. And when we've seen that it can be used for exploitation, you know, whether it is the questions over charitable funds or whether it's the question over personal conduct, then of course there has got to be question. Nobody has a right to reign. And I think we've got to seriously ask those questions now.
I've got one that can see.